Welcome to Burlingame City Council meeting of March 6th, 2023. And a little like Rip Van Winkle, it feels like we're waking up after a 3-year slumber.
And with those words, my guest today, Mayor Michael Brownrigg, brought the City Council together for their first live meeting in 3 years. Hello again, everyone. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. And now let's meet Mayor Michael Brownrigg. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today on
My
Burlingame.
pleasure,
It's
Mark.
a small town podcast. Thank you. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, and I just really glad you could come by today. So,
It's my pleasure.
So Michael, 3 years, Zoom meetings twice a month. Is that what happened?
Yeah, throughout COVID, we weren't allowed to meet in person. It wasn't smart for the public or for the council members or city staff.
Yeah, boy. How's it feel to be back?
You know, it's great. I feel the same way about being able to get into the office. There's a lot of efficiency from working remotely, and certainly an ability to take care of household chores more efficiently. But the creativity and collaboration of being in person is really telling.
There's a wonderful mix.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a great mix to that.
I agree.
Before I begin our interview today, I'm just going to tell the listeners a little bit about your service time in Burlingame, because it's extensive. You were elected to the City Council in 2009, and this is your third term as mayor, having served in 2014 and 2018?
Correct.
Yeah. Prior to that, though, prior to your service on the council, you were on the Planning Commission for 8 years.
Yes, I was.
You have a thumb on the heartbeat, huh? Or on the pulse?
I take great care for Burlingame, and I've been honored to be a part of helping steer it.
That's for sure. Boy. Okay, so Michael, today I'm going to break this interview up into about 5 different sections that we're going to talk about. And I wish I could say I prepared all these questions on my own, but I do have some colleagues that gave me some suggested questions and ideas.
No problem, Mark.
We're going to warm up with a couple of simple ones.
Okay.
What unique characteristics or traits do you bring to the position of mayor?
Well, I think I started my career as a U.S. diplomat. So I served for 13 years, served this country proudly for 13 years around the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, here in the United States, in Washington, D.C. So I think civility and listening to people is something that I'm good at. I like that process. I like being able to work with people and listen and try to find common ground. So I think that helps as a legislator, whether as a council person or as mayor. I aspire to make our community better, higher quality of life, make sure everything's running well, and that we're growing into the future. So as mayor, I get to help set the agenda. There's not much difference between being mayor and being a council member, but you do get to set the agenda, and that's important.
Absolutely. And the mayor's term is 1 year.
1 year, yes. We're a civilized little town. We just take turns being mayor. I sometimes joke that if you live long enough, you will become mayor of Burlingame. There's no drama, no muss, no fuss.
Right.
You don't read about us in the newspaper. We just get on with it. And I will say as a sidebar comment that I think that's really important. We don't squabble about things like that so that we can focus on doing the people's business.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let me check my notes here. Okay, can you share with us something that you learned from having served your 2 prior terms as mayor? Something you learned a couple of, past times, and what you could do about that today?
So what I realized after the first time I was mayor was how valuable it is to be able to help set the agenda. As a council person, you can suggest that subjects be put on the agenda, but you have to have the cooperation of other colleagues, and then importantly, the staff have to also agree that it's sort of worthy of merits further discussion. As the mayor, you're allowed to push the agenda a little bit. You can suggest a topic. We'll talk about new issues this year that might not have been talked about if I weren't mayor, because I thought they're important or timely. So that's where I think you have the greatest opportunity as mayor to to be more productive even. There are those who are happy just sort of rubber stamping staff or, cutting ribbons and doing the ceremonial stuff. That's fun. It's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. But to move the city forward, this is your chance to help drive that process.
You may have answered my next question with that question, because I was going to ask you, I think you have about 6 months left as mayor.
Yes.
In this particular term, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, can you get things done as the mayor that you could not get things done as a city council member? And I think you just kind of answered that with the agenda.
Yes. I mean, again, all of our votes are equal. You need 3 votes to pass something. That doesn't change. The mayor is not, doesn't have a super vote or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing I have learned after, 12 years on council is government really does work slowly. I mean, we are going to open up a beautiful new affordable housing building over on Park. And that was a project that we set in motion about 6 years ago. What I realize is that if you have a good idea and you can get it started and get it rolling, hopefully there'll be enough inertia to see it get through.
Yeah. At Rotary yesterday, Jackie Spear was the guest speaker, and she said the same thing. We can't get anything done in government. She's just laughingly, but somewhat true.
Well, somewhat true, although I would say that she's commenting from the federal government point of view, and their gridlock has set in. And if you go back, so I really believe that gridlock has set in Washington because it's so polarized. And if there's one thing that's important to me, and I think mostly we've been able to maintain this in Burlingame, is a city council that works together and isn't at odds with one another and isn't trying to score points against one another. So that we can focus, as I say, on doing the people's business. And we've gotten a lot done in 10 years.
Great. What are the biggest challenges for 23 and 24?
Well, anybody in government, our first obligation is to make sure we have a budget that can support the level of service that people in Burlingame expect. They don't expect to have holes in their roads for very long. Those should be filled in. Cracks in the sidewalk should get fixed. Trees need to get trimmed. Park and rec programs need to get managed. All of that costs money. And we need to make sure that the budget is healthy. This has been our city suffered much more than most through COVID. So interestingly, if you look across the country, municipal finances actually often were improved by COVID because the federal government put a lot of subsidies in to make up for lost revenue. Most cities, their lost revenue came from lost sales tax. The feds figured people aren't going to be shopping, you're not going to have sales tax, you're going to be hurting, and so they generously supported cities across the country with subsidy to help make up for that. Our big loss wasn't sales tax. In fact, nobody lost that much sales tax, and it bounced back pretty quick. So a number of cities wound up on the plus side from the federal subsidies, but not Burlingame. In the full year prior to COVID, we took in $29 million in hotel tax. That's off a $75 million budget.
Boy.
Yeah, that budget is the budget that pays for police and fire and sidewalks and parks. So I'm not counting water and sewer, which has its own rate system, but the system that pays for the kind of services that we all expect, $75 million, $29 million of that came from hotel tax. In the full year of COVID, in the first full year of COVID, hotel tax was down to $5 million. We lost $24 million off a $75 million budget. I challenge anybody to run a business losing almost one-third of their revenue, and yet we didn't miss a beat. Residents didn't see any diminishment in service. We didn't lay anybody off. We didn't furlough anybody. We kept everybody going. That's because our city had wisely squirreled away a very deep set of reserves that we were able to bank on. And thank goodness that we have been a conservatively managed city for a long time. We've always been careful about resources, and we treat them as very precious. So we spent them down. We kept services up. Now we have to rebuild them. But the point is, our hotel tax is still not back to that $29 million. It's up. We're going to be in the mid-teens, 15, 18 million this year. That's a lot better than 5. It's still not 29. So we're still working on that. And so therefore, to answer your question in a roundabout way, Mark, budget is always first and foremost. You've got to make sure that we can afford the library and the parks and everything else. That's why people are here, for the quality of life. The second priority is to see that these plans that we put in motion over the last 3, 4, 5 years get completed. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on. I hope that by the end of next year, we'll be able to open up a town square in the middle of our city. Pretty amazing for a 100-year-old city that's fully built out to be able to create a town square.
And how?
I'm excited about that. That's been a vision of all of ours, for well over a decade, and now it's coming true. So those are the things, that and opening up the affordable housing, that I'm really looking forward to in the year ahead.
Great. Okay, thank you for all of that, Michael. So that was called the warm-up.
Okay, that was the easy stuff.
Yeah, now we're going to go for the hard balls, the fastballs, okay?
You bet.
And I'm going to talk, this one's called construction in Burlingame.
Okay.
And all over town, I'm hearing the same chant. What's with all the buildings going up around town and nobody's occupying them? There's extensive plans for the Bayfront from the Hyatt Cinema to Max's Restaurant. I'm hearing that these buildings will be replaced with life science buildings. Yesterday's San Mateo Daily Journal ran a headline, Burlingame looks to invigorate the Bayfront. Can you tell us about some of those plans?
Sure. So focusing on the Bayside, in a way, you walk back 3 years to the revised general plan that the city created. And our general plan was an extensive project which engaged citizens and experts and consultants. So a general plan, Mark, is for a city like a business plan is for a business. What do you think is going to happen in the next year, 5 years, 10 years? We hadn't done a general plan since 1969.
Why is that?
Because people had taken their eye off the ball, and they just hadn't, it's not good, frankly, to go that long without having a plan. So we redid the plan, and we set a vision, and the vision included more housing and more development on the Bayside. The Bayside, let's focus on the Bayside. So the Bayside, we felt, is a beautiful asset, underutilized, and a chance for to create great jobs and also to improve the Bayside as a resource for our community. And so the council has been focused for years now on improving the Bayside. That it means bringing amenities like Top Golf. It means seeing sites that had been ring fenced and dirt, grow into beautiful buildings. It means completing the Bay Trail, which is really important to me. And we're steadily making progress against those objectives. Now, redevelopment on the Bayside, I think, is going to make it more beautiful. It is a way to generate revenue for this city. I remember back when that land was, I don't remember, but reading the history when that land was created. And at the time, the developer said he was running low on cash, and he said, you have to let me put up warehouses. I need something to generate cash flow. And the council said, no, our vision for the Bayside is not warehouses, it's hotels. He's like, I don't have time to build hotels. Too bad. The guy went bankrupt. Yeah. But those hotels got built, and they've been what has been the engine of revenue for this city. So now redeveloping some of the land into biotech, life sciences is going to be the next engine for revenue. And I'm sorry, but if you're not thinking about how to generate revenue for the city, then you're not really being a responsible steward, not just for this generation, but for the next generation.
Okay. All right. Virgin Airlines had a headquarters over there by Facebook in that area. Now it's been demolished, and I see a new building's going up. What's that about?
Life sciences again.
Life sciences. Yeah. Terrific. Okay. I'm also hearing some plans that there might be some redevelopment about the Burlingame Plaza. Can you comment on that?
I can't largely because I'm unaware. I know that there has been talk. It's got a mixed ownership, so it's not just one person making up their mind.
Okay.
It is, I think one could look at that property and say, boy, this is really an opportunity for something different.
Okay.
But it's up to the ownership, and I'm not sure what they're thinking.
In your position, I'm sure you're getting emails or texts or phone calls or bumping into people in the street, and they've all got ideas what to do out on the Bayfront. what are some suggestions from citizens that you hear? Like, instead of life science, can you put a park out there, or do you hear different things? Different suggestions?
Not so much about the Bayfront. I don't have, no. I mean, the short answer is no, I don't.
Right.
I think, to be honest, I think when you explain to residents that we're trying very hard to complete the Bay Trail, we're trying very hard to make sure that we can build up the embankment against sea level rise. That's going to be an extremely expensive task, and something that our city is leading the entire county on in terms of setting development standards so that the perimeter of the Bayside gets built up and creates a seawall against sea level rise. That protects everybody's property values, by the way, not just the people on the Bayside. I think it's becoming more and more beautiful, and I think our public is going to love it.
Great. It's a slow process. We know that.
Development is a slow process.
It's a
Redevelopment
process,
is a slow process.
Get
But
that.
if you think about the Bay Trail, and then there's some big gaps in it here and there, and we're addressing those gaps. And to be able to have a single trail that goes from one end of Burlingame to the other on the Bayside, I think it's going to be beautiful. There are great restaurants along the way. I think it's going to be a terrific amenity for Burlingame residents.
Okay. I toyed with asking this next question, and I kind of went back and forth. And anyway, with all these empty or partially empty office buildings being built along the bayfront as well as downtown and throughout Burlingame, how does the city generate income off of empty buildings?
So that's not really the right way to think about the question. The right way to think about the question is, are those buildings going to stay empty, right? That's the important question.
Correct.
To be honest, from a city revenue point of view, if that's all I cared about, which isn't all I care about, if that's all I cared about, as soon as they build the building, I'm done. The property value has been increased, in some cases by 10 or 20 fold. I mean, if you look at the site that used to be the old drive-in, I think it sold 25 years ago for $16 million. I think the current assessed value is probably $400 to $500 million.
Amazing.
That's an increase of, well, you can do the math in your head, and all of that 1% goes to 1% property tax goes to fund our schools, our community colleges, our county health, and the city of Burlingame. So, that's where cities make most of their revenue from redevelopment, is in the increased property value. So at some level, cynically, as soon as the building is built, if it's empty from a revenue point of view, I don't care. But that's not all it's about. It's about creating vitality. It's about creating jobs. It's about creating places for people to be and to gather. So we don't like seeing empty buildings. The reality is, developers are not stupid. They don't build mostly buildings that are going to be empty. And, this has been a tough economic environment over the last 12 months, and then following COVID and the whole, fleeing from the office perspective. But guess what? People are going back into the office. It's where you started the interview, right? You were so excited to get together again in person. That's happening across the country. It may not be 5 days a week in the office. It is going to be 3 days a week. The financial industry is already 5 days a week. You are coming into the office. No more sitting at home and pretending to work. Sorry. So I think the office, people are coming back to offices. And I think having beautiful office space that draws people to your downtown, downtowns that don't have vitality, they don't just stay pretty nice places, they deteriorate. Cities are either growing or they're declining. The notion that you can put something in a little snow globe and shake it up and have snow and it all stays the same, not the way cities work. They are a living being, and you need to keep the heartbeat growing.
Well said, and I think that answers my next question, because I was going to ask you, do you really think that we're going to get all these office spaces leased? And obviously you
Yes.
are very confident.
No, I'm completely confident. I mean, again, I think the people who develop them are not stupid. This isn't free money they just found. This is investor money. But more than that, so I just believe that. And the market, markets are good at clearing. But beyond that, I think Burlingame is one of the best places to live and work on the peninsula. We're close to San Francisco. We're close to Silicon Valley. We're close to the airport. We have rail. We are a beautiful place from a climate point of view. We have a charming downtown. All these things make it one of the most appealing places to come to work anywhere.
I do too, after working here for 22 years.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so the next one is called below market rate housing / low income housing. Mm-hmm. I'm confused, and I think some of our listeners are too. Can you explain what those two terms mean, or are they just one and the same? That would be below market rate housing and low income housing. What's the difference?
Yeah. So those are often used interchangeably. I think maybe one way to think about it is below market could be anything. It could be something that just happens to be below market. So, for example, we have a lot of older, smaller multifamily buildings here in this city, and because the landlords are good people and they don't raise rents as much as they can, a lot of times you'll look at those apartments and they could be 25 to 30% below market, below what a different owner might get for that unit if they were, So that might be what you think of as below market, what we sometimes call in the housing finance business naturally occurring affordable housing, the nice acronym of NOAA. Affordable housing, at least the way I think about it, is deed restricted. So when the unit was built, it was restricted that you can never ask more rent than X, and X could be set at for people who are making 80% of the area median income. It could be 50%. It can be different target income levels. And to anticipate a question, the way you know the rent is affordable is nobody should pay more than 30% of their pre-tax income in rent. And if you pay more than that, then you're what's called cost burdened. You're spending more on housing than you should.
Wow, that's a lot of math for me, Mike.
Sorry. You asked.
You did ask. Okay. So what is considered affordable rent? Same kind of math?
So basically, like I just said, affordable rent in the affordable housing world, or really any world, is 30% of your pre-tax revenue. If you're spending more than 30% of your pre-tax income on housing, then you are not spending as much as you should be on food, on clothing, on savings, on transportation. It's crowding something out. Or you're carrying two jobs. 25% of workers of color in this country have two jobs to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. I get that. I had many at Molly Stone's.
Yeah.
2 or 3 jobs, absolutely. So what's happening? Do we have low income housing or apartments on Park that are just being built?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then over by the train tracks, was that another development?
There's another one that's going to. So there's 2 ways that we are creating affordable housing in this city, and I'm really proud of our record of accomplishment. About 20 to 25% of all of the units that we've approved or are building are going to be deed restricted affordable. Okay, that's pretty good. So there are some buildings that are all affordable, 100% maintained as affordable for lower income people. By the way, just so we're not like imagining the wrong thing, by low income, so one person, the average area median income for one person in this county is $110,000. So if you're making $110,000, congratulations, you're at the median income. If you're making $80,000, you're low income.
Wow.
Yeah, this is not people who are
That's
pushing.
Interesting.
This is not people pushing shopping carts with all their belongings in the shopping cart, right? So these are the people who teach our kids. These are the people who probably more than serve our food. These are the people who are the paralegals. These are the people who make the city run. They are our auto mechanics. They are our plumbers, oftentimes, and so I want to make sure. And the city council wants to make sure that Burlingame stays open to hardworking people, not all of whom are tech executives.
Right.
And so I don't particularly like the term low income housing because I think a lot of people have an image in their mind, which is just not the kind of, we're happy to serve everybody who's below income, but these are your neighbors. These are people who you might not know it, but are sleeping in their cars because they have a job. They just can't afford housing. And I think we need to try harder to make room for that. So, so to answer your question, the building on on Park, and then the building on near the BART station, the old car wash.
Yes, right.
Those will be 100% affordable. So every unit in it will be kept below the income levels. Other housing, though, that's market rate, we insist on at least 10% of those units being affordable. So we're creating affordable units both in standalone buildings, but also in market rate buildings.
Is there a certain number that each city has to come up with to go by state standards, or?
There is. I don't pay much attention to it. I don't have a lot of patience for that process, and I've written in the Vice Mayor Colson and I wrote a double-barreled editorial about the housing policy, and that particular process of number counting, which we think is dumb and a waste of time. That is not to say I don't support building more housing. In fact, we're ahead of our requirements. So I'm proud of that, but I'm not proud of it because the state told us to do it. I'm proud of it because it's the right thing to do.
Because you're making it happen.
And it's the right thing to do.
Right. Great.
Like, as they say, when in doubt, do the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for all of that.
You're welcome.
Helped me with that a lot, and I'm sure our listeners as well. Okay, let's warm it up a little bit more now. We're going to go to the trees, buddy, the trees.
All
okay?
Right. Yep.
And so over 300 trees are scheduled to be cut down along the El Camino corridor in the summer of 24, I think. I guess, okay?
Mm-hmm. Roughly.
In a recent letter to the San Mateo Daily Journal, you were quoted as saying, "We don't plant trees for ourselves, we plant them for our children." A letter back to the editor replied, "In what world does he live where his children will be able to afford to live here, or frankly even want to live here?" Can you comment?
Well, I never want to be disagreeable. Obviously, the letter writer and I would not see eye to eye. I'm not quite sure what the thrust of the person's message is. Am I not supposed to think long term? Does she only want me to think about the near term? Are we only here on this planet to help ourselves? Is that it? And it's okay if we burn everything down and we use everything up because to hell with the next generation? Is that the thrust of the message? I wasn't sure. Or is the thrust of the message that we don't have enough affordable housing? But haven't we just spent 20 minutes talking about affordable housing? So yes, I agree. We need more affordable housing. I think somebody is just unhappy. And I'm sorry about that.
Great answer. Okay. While they're cutting down the trees, or once the trees are cut down, I believe El Camino is going to be repaved as well, correct?
So let me back up for a second, because this is a major project for the city of Burlingame.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm proud to have been part of the team bringing this to fruition. We started this project 5 years ago. We started by an observation that El Camino through Burlingame stinks. The water doesn't drain, the road is a nightmare, and most importantly, the sidewalks are appalling. Mm-hmm. You can't push a baby stroller, you cannot push a wheelchair on many parts of El Camino's sidewalks. That's not fair to our residents who are either in a wheelchair or with a walker or who have kids. It's like not right. And so we needed to rehabilitate El Camino from one end to the other. We gathered a group of citizens who spent over a year working together with Caltrans to figure out what's the best way to do this. Because the other part of El Camino, it's not just that it's in terrible shape. I mean, I've lived around the world, and there are many third world countries whose roads are way better than El Camino Real. But it's also an iconic treescape. Burlingame is one of the few places on the peninsula where El Camino slims down to 4 lanes and it's largely residential. Everywhere else, it's a strip mall, 6-8 lanes wide. Mm-hmm. To my mind, very unappealing, but whatever. I love our stretch of El Camino Real, but it was in horrible shape. It was like a house that hadn't been looked after for 30 or 40 years, a lot of deferred maintenance. Once the citizens, and the citizens include members from the Historic Society, were deeply grateful for their participation, people who live there, people who walk there, people who ride there, stakeholders across our community, and we came to realize that if we want to fix El Camino Real and make it a proper street that's safe for pedestrians and motorists and beautiful, we need to rebuild it. And rebuilding it means replanting it. This historic grove of trees, it's a living historical icon, and living things die. And we came to realize we could not protect all of those huge eucalyptus and repair El Camino. That was an incompatible goal. So our goal is to make sure that when we rebuild El Camino, we have a tree canopy that goes from one end to the other. And it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to take time. And that's what I was trying to say in that comment, is that, it takes time. But it's going to be worth it. It's going to create a street that is repaved. It's going to create sidewalks that are generous enough for people to get their wheelchairs on and their baby strollers. It's going to have a tree canopy that is much more dense than the average Caltrans highway, and that was an important concession that Caltrans made to us. And I'll tell you what, after this last batch of storms, Mark, for the first time that I've been a politician in Burlingame, I have people calling me saying, when are you going to take out my tree? Mm-hmm. I am worried about this tree.
Sure.
And we dodged a dozen bullets during those storms. A dozen trees fell down on El Camino and crushed some cars and took down power lines, and not a single person was hurt, but for the grace of God.
I know. That was amazing. Was it 12 trees that went down?
12 on Burlingame, on El Camino.
Boy.
Many more trees across the city.
Yeah.
Many more trees. And nobody got hurt, thank God.
Yeah. I was wondering, while we're waiting for all of this to happen, is there an opportunity for Caltrans to come out and patch up some of the
Yes, of
potholes?
course. Yes, they will. They will patch. They are patching. They're a stretched agency. I'm sorry, I wanted to finish. Normally, if a government like ours had been through the storm we just were and came to the view all of a sudden that we should do something about El Camino, we would be 5 to 8 years away from being able to actually fix it.
Boy.
Nothing ever happens fast. But Mark, because we started this process 5 or now 6 years ago, we not only have a plan, we not only have a compromise with Caltrans, but the state has allocated $100 million to fixing El Camino from one end to the other. Do you know how hard it is to find $100 million to do something? We have that allocation, and that's because we thought ahead.
Terrific. That's super. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be gorgeous when it's done.
It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a real pain to get through it.
That,
it's going to be a real pain, and there's no really good way to do it. And we're just going to have to suffer together, and at the end, know it's going to be a really, really great resource. And initially, the trees will be smaller, and then they'll be bigger, and there'll be a canopy, and it's going to be gorgeous.
Great. Okay, Mr. Mayor, you've kind of moved through the heat. We're going to go to what I call now rapid fire questions. And why do I call them that? I don't know. They're just a bunch of things that are going on. So
okay.
We're going to start with, I'm hearing some complaints about dangerous driving.
Do you ever hear any compliments, Mark?
Oh, Michael. We love this city, and you know that, okay? Absolutely. But when people know I'm going to talk to the mayor, they all have, ask him this, okay?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm hearing complaints about dangerous driving on our city streets. Can we upgrade traffic enforcement?
It's not really a matter of upgrading traffic enforcement. It's trying to, make sure that our limited resources are spent in the best possible way. So the chief is constantly moving traffic, our police officers around to try to make sure that we keep our streets safe. So I would just say if somebody has a particular intersection or road that they think is dangerous, let us know. And we'll make sure the chief of police knows. And you can't be everywhere all at once.
Okay.
I've thought from time to time about whether it would make sense to use technology to slow people down. They do that in England. They have radar that gives you tickets. It doesn't have to be a policeman there to give you a ticket. You'll get it in the mail. Yeah. I think there's pros and cons about that, but I would be open to investigating that if we really started to have significant dangerous intersections, and you can't put a policeman at every intersection. So there are ways that we could beef this up if it really looked to be a serious problem.
Okay.
And so I'm willing to listen, is
Great.
what I'm trying to say.
Spin bikes, the new e-bike program that's here in Burlingame
Yep.
now. How long's the program been up and running?
It's been up for about a month. I think it's a combo with Millbrae.
Okay, great. And we had Lime bikes, and
Yep.
that went away, and now we have Spin. Why? I mean, was there a reason why we're coming back to the e-bikes? Demand or something?
We didn't cancel the what were they called? Lime
Yeah.
bikes. We didn't cancel them. They pulled out.
Okay.
I think it's, to be honest, I speak as an investor now. I don't think it's a great business model, but and then Spin said, well, we'd like to give it a try. This is a definitely love it, hate it kind of program. There are people who hate it.
Yeah, there's people that love it.
And then there are people who love it. And we're monitoring and we're paying attention.
Okay, so how many locations are there around town where people can pick up a bike?
I don't want to guess.
That's all right.
I can't remember.
And do you know what the inventory of bikes are by any chance? Do they go with 100 or 200 or okay? Well, we're going to move. We're going to move quickly.
I will say that if people are interested in the specifics of the Spin Bike program, they should talk to our sustainability coordinator, Sigal Michael, and she has all the data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, the no smoking ban on Broadway. How's it going?
Fantastic.
Good.
Nothing but positive reviews so far from both residents and moms and dads with kids and merchants.
And that's my good buddy John Kavranian that kind of spearheaded that, piloted it.
He did spearhead that. I would say what we like about it as council is that it was a ground up initiative and not a top down. We're hesitant to tell people where to,
of course,
how to live their lives and be super, looking over their shoulder. But when an initiative comes up from, the business district or a group of people, then we pay really serious attention. And we were delighted to get on board with this. But I want to emphasize that initiative, which I think is very successful, came from the merchants themselves.
Any spillover to Burlingame Avenue?
So I think the Burlingame Business Improvement District folks are looking at it. Initially, they said, no thanks, not for us. And now I think they're seeing how popular it is, and they're considering it. And again, we're not going to enforce a ban on Burlingame Avenue, but if the merchants of if a majority want to get together and suggest that to us, we'll be all ears.
Okay, great. Let's see. What about the street closure on Burlingame Avenue? That is scheduled for what, sometime in August?
August 19th through Labor Day, 2 weeks.
And what part of Burlingame Ave will be locked off or closed off to traffic?
The section between Lorton and Primrose.
Okay.
So those 2 blocks.
What's the purpose?
The purpose is fun. We want to throw a party for the people of Burlingame. There was a lot of enjoyment when Burlingame Avenue got closed during COVID. In fact, it was so popular that we had to close it down because people were getting too close to each other. So we wanted to see if we could generate that kind of enjoyment and stuff again. But we're not anywhere close to like permanently closing a street. That was not the point. The point was to get the benefits of a street closure for pedestrians without making it a full-time thing and all the parking issues that go with that.
Okay, so I can quote you as saying you don't think it's going to turn into permanent or temp or whatever.
It's not intended to be a pilot for a full-time closure, but look, if people love it.
What about the merchants? Aren't you getting any pushback from those guys? I mean, where do people park in front of their store? Yeah,
so the park in front of the store bit, there's not a civil right to have parking in front of your store, and let me tell you why that matters. Because if anybody wants to develop a new shop, if there was parking required, nobody would ever be able to redevelop. Right? There is no parking, so we've built a beautiful parking structure that's 1 block away. We have surface parking lots scattered throughout the downtown. You may not be able to find a spot right in front of the store you want to go to. Guess what? Get out and walk and see some of the other stores.
It's funny. if you're in the city and you're looking for parking, and you find a parking lot that's a block away from your restaurant, you're happy to do that.
You're
right?
ecstatic.
Here in Burlingame, we seem to have an issue with that because anyway.
Well, it's habit,
Because
and
we
it's
have parking.
it's not a great habit, to be honest. I mean, at this point on the peninsula, God isn't making any more land, and BCDC isn't letting us fill in the bay. So the land we have is the land we have. And if you see an at-grade parking lot, like, there's something wrong. There should be something better going on. Put the parking underground, put it in a structure. It really, so.
Great. Okay. I'm going to my short list now.
Okay.
You're almost through. Quick update on Topgolf. Did they break ground yet?
Yep, they've started to break ground. It's slower than we'd wished, but they still are looking at an opening at the end of next year.
Okay, good. Okay, Michael, I know that you and the other council members, besides providing great service to the city, all of you guys have day jobs. Why don't you tell our listeners about your job, because I think it's very interesting. And while we're at it, you can give a shout out to your 4 kids and your wife, Marty, as well.
Well, thank you, Mark. And Marty has always enjoyed talking to you all those years at Molly Stone's. And thank you for remembering her. And I'll say hello to her for you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm really happy at work. I mean, being mayor is work. But we all have full-time, well, at least this council all has full-time jobs. And my full-time job is something I started a couple of years ago, and I'm just super excited about it. I created a new investment fund with some partners in Washington, D.C., and we are out to close the racial wealth gap. And the way we are doing this is we raised money and we go out and buy companies from owners who are ready to retire that have large workforces of color, and we turn those companies into 100% employee-owned businesses. So in today's America, 2/3 of Black and Latino workers retire with zero savings after a lifetime of work. Zero. And that's why 50% of Americans of all backgrounds report they don't know how they would pay an unexpected $400 medical bill. They don't have savings. So we talk a lot about income inequality, but we overlook asset inequality. How few people have savings or ownership of homes or businesses. So we are putting people on a path to business ownership. 2/3 of Black and Latino retire with zero savings. The average employee who retires from an employee-owned business has $140,000 in savings. And those are shares in the business that they haven't paid for. They've just earned them by showing up every day, doing their job, going to work. And that kind of financial freedom allows them then to invest in their kids. It means they're not going to lose their home in their old age. It means they can pay for a medical procedure if they need to. We think it can be life-changing. And this is exactly the right time to be doing this, Mark, because over the next decade, several million companies in the United States with 5 employees or more are going to change hands because they're owned by people like you and me. They're owned by baby boomers, and we're retiring. And we want the workforce to have a chance to buy those businesses and run them. I often say the first generation of wealth should go to the person who took the risk, probably maxed out his or her credit cards to make the business work, but that the next generation of wealth doesn't have to go to private equity, doesn't have to go to a strategic competitor, can go to the people who show up every day, bringing value, bringing hard work, making the company a success.
And you're nationwide?
Yes, we are. We've done 2 transactions, a plumbing company in Denver, Colorado, and a landscaping company in El Paso, Texas, and we've put 200 workers and their families on a path to wealth.
Fabulous.
Really exciting.
Yeah.
Really exciting. Looking for a great California company.
I'll help you look.
Okay.
4 children?
4 kids, all doing great. Super proud of them. You can tell they got their mother's brains, thank goodness. But yeah, they're doing great. Thank you for asking.
Michael Brownrigg, Mayor Michael Brownrigg, thank you so much for being a guest today.
My pleasure, Mark.
I'd like to thank Michael Brownrigg, the mayor of Burlingame, for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a small-town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Thanks to Michael Nagler, my script advisor, Kathy and Shelby Lucchese for editing and producing, the great Ray Tyler for video, original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded on Thursday, June 1st, 2023. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this recording, and no part can be copied or replayed without the permission of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.